As with last week's episode 3, I'm just going to start today's episode by giving a brief content warning. This is specifically relevant to Red Museum, which is the second episode we're going to talk about today. There is nothing graphic shown within the episode at all, but in case you're sensitive of such things, there are a couple of things that are discussed that might make people uncomfortable. This includes child abuse. There is a paedophile within the episode who is heavily inferred is filming children while they dress. And there is also a reference to several rapes performed by teenagers within the town. As I say, you don't see anything within the episode with regards to either of these, but just be aware it's there.
Hello and welcome to Things Are Getting Strange, an X-Files Rewatch podcast. I'm Nick.
And I'm Kim.
And I take it we have news.
We do have news. Finally, people are giving me stuff on Twitter. Okay, to start off with the one that's more relevant to Nick and I, on the 12th of March, which is a Sunday, there is going to be a 30th anniversary screening of the pilot episode. It's in London, it's at the Ronson Theatre, which is at the Science Museum. It's actually part of the Science Fiction Film Festival, which the Science Museum is holding this year. But the Q&A that follows it is, I believe it's going to be via video link, but it will be with Chris Carter and a Professor Anne Simon, who was the X-Files' science advisor for all 11 seasons and one of the movies. She's also written a book called The Real Science Behind the X-Files, Microbes, Meteorites and Mutants. But yeah, it sounds like a fun event. Nick and I will be going to it and, recommend anybody who can get to London. It sounds like it's going to be fun. Like I said, it's the 12th of March this year. The doors will open at 1:35 for a 1:50 start on that day. So if you can come, great. Sounds like it's going to be fun. If not, we'll let you know what we think when we get back. On a similar note, a month or two ago, we mentioned FileFest, that's File with a PH, which is an X-Files convention that's happening later this year. I believe it's the 8th and the 10th of September in Minnesota. We did just mention it briefly when they announced it a few months back, but they have also announced their special guests. The list so far, with more to follow apparently, is Frank Spotnitz, Chris Owens, who I believe is Agent Spender, Dean Hagland and Bruce Harwood, so you've got 2/3 of the Lone Gunman there, Pat Skipper, who I think is Bill Scully Jr., and Larry Musser, who is Detective Manners.
Amongst other things.
But yeah, there will apparently be more to follow. If you're interested, we will keep you posted. If you want to go and sign up for yourself, the website to go to is FileFest, again that's File with a PH, .offbrandevents.com, or you can also find them on Twitter. My last very cool thing that I have discovered this week, if you head over to SirisN, that's SIRISN on Twitter, they've been making custom X-Files Funkos. Over the last week, they've posted pictures of all 3 Lone Gunmen, Kryzik and Deep Throat. They are super neat and they look spot on. I recommend just going just to have a look at them. The only other thing we've been discussing on Twitter this week is Valentine's related, because as of recording, Valentine's Day is going to be in a few days. It will have just happened by the time we actually post this episode. So I've been chatting with people on Mastodon and Twitter about what they think the most romantic X-Files episode is. I think you can possibly guess, Nick.
It depends. I mean, I can see people making arguments for the truth. I can see people making arguments for the natural. I can see arguments for One Breath.
The Rain King is the most popular one.
That was the one I was looking for. Yes, the Rain King. There's a great argument to be made for Rain King.
It surprised me a little because that's less a Mulder and Scully romance, which I thought was what people would go for. But it is a really sweet episode. But yeah, that's been our chat. We've also mentioned, like you said, episodes like The Truth, the baseball scene where Mulder and Scully in the batting cage from The Unnatural, and also Je Suis.
Oh yeah, Je Suis makes sense. So the first of our 2 episodes this week is Firewalker, first broadcast on the 18th of November 1994, directed by David Nutter and written by Howard Gordon. Not that we're going to prejudge the episode or anything.
You're already prejudging the episode and we both know it.
Notable guest stars include Bradley Whitford, who played Dr. Daniel Trepkos, who we probably know best for Cabin in the Woods, where he actually has a name. I don't think I've ever picked up on his name before.
He's the younger of the 2 not special agents, like secret...
The tech people, yeah.
Yeah.
But he's Steve Hadley, apparently.
Oh, okay.
But you'll also see him in Get Out, where he played Dean Armitage, the patriarch of the family.
Mm-hmm.
He was in Godzilla King of the Monsters as Dr. Rick Stanton.
Mm-hmm.
He's in Frasier as a Colin voice again.
Ah, okay.
Brooklyn Nine-Nine as Captain Roger Peralta. Peralta's father.
Oh.
The airplane pilot.
Oh, yes, I remember. Yes, it is.
Yeah. We haven't seen it, but he's in Infinity Train, which came recently, as Agent Civ. Okay, also guest starring, there's Leyland Orser, who played Jason Ludwig. He's been in Alien Resurrection as Larry Purvis. This would be the guy who infamously gets chest bursted right at the end of the film. Through someone else's head.
Through someone else's head, yeah.
Also managed to appear on Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Star Trek Voyager, and Enterprise. Then we have one of the more notorious guest stars would be Shawnee Smith as Jessie O'Neill, who, the only thing we've ever seen her in, is Saw, where she plays Amanda Young, and Saw 2, and Saw 3, and Saw 6, and she's going to be in Saw 10.
She's also in one of the American Grudge sequels.
Is she? Oh, I didn't see that.
She
one.
plays a psychiatrist, and the one with the little boy. I can't remember if that's the second one or the third one.
Third, I think.
Mm.
But she's going to be in Saw X this year.
Oh, cool. I really
I don't
like
know if
her.
we're meant to know that one yet, but... And Hiro Kanagawa as Peter Tanaka. He will show up twice more in The X-Files as Dr. Yonichi in Synchrony in Season 4, and as Garner in My Struggle in Season 10. He's also in 4 episodes of Millennium, and will appear in the Lone Gunman spin-off series as well. Firewalker, then. A transmission is received at the California Institute of Technology from Firewalker, a robot sent inside Mount Avalon in Oregon. In the transmission, they can see the body of Erickson, the chief seismologist, and a moving shadow. This should be impossible due to the extremely high temperature in the cave. The camera is then destroyed shortly afterwards. Mulder and Scully are called in by Pierce, who has left the project due to a falling out with the leader, Dr. Daniel Trepkos. Mulder cautions Scully about joining in, but Scully insists she will be okay. Arriving at the scene, Pierce checks the instruments outside while Mulder and Scully head inside. They find a traumatized team consisting of Ludwig, Peter Tanaka, and Jesse, who claim that Trepkos destroyed the lab and disappeared after Firewalker's first descent into the volcano. Outside, someone attacks and kills Pierce. His body is found soon after. Mulder reviews Trepkos' fragmentary notes and finds references to a silicon-based life form, but Scully is dubious of his conclusions. Tanaka succumbs to a fever, but refuses help. Attempting to evacuate him, Tanaka flees into the woods and a growth bursts out of his neck, killing him instantly. Scully finds sand in his lungs after performing an autopsy, and this seemingly corroborates the previous discussions of a silicon-based life form. Scully theorizes if the spores produced by the growth do not immediately find a host, they will die. Mulder and Ludwig descend into the volcano in search of Trepkos. Ludwig is shot by a flare gun by Trepkos, who then sets his body on fire to prevent further infection. Trepkos relates that Firewalker brought back an unusual sample and Erickson, the chief seismologist, infected himself and after his death the rest of the crew. He also claims the infection wants to make the host infect others. Jessie apparently succumbing to this pathogen handcuffs herself to Scully, but Scully traps her in an adjacent room when the growth bursts from her throat. Mulder and Scully subsequently evacuate and leave Trepkos behind and are then quarantined. Mount Avalon is sealed off, and Firewalker is retrieved, but no useful data can be retrieved from the robot. Trepkos is last seen carrying Jessie's body into the volcano.
So, Nick, I understand you don't like this episode.
You got ahead of me. I don't like this episode. In fact, I was actually going to say, in reference to one of Trepkos' rather bizarre lines, we'll go for, shall we address the elephant that Firewalker brought back from the depths? That's how it describes the silicon-based life form.
Yeah.
So the elephant retrieved from the depths of the volcano in the room of, this is ice with a bit of Darkness Falls thrown in for good measure.
I will go a step further to say it's exactly ice.
It is exactly like ice. In fact, I didn't actually get a chance to check, but I'm pretty sure one of the musical things is exactly the same in both episodes.
I wouldn't be surprised. They do reuse those all the time.
They do, but it's one of the ones you associate very much with ice and less so with other things. So actually putting it into Firewalker is really bad. But what is going on? Because this episode seems to change halfway through. Or at least the cold open has got almost nothing to do with the rest of the episode.
The shadows moving in the super hot part of this caldera.
Yeah, and I actually noted it down. It's 302 degrees centigrade.
Oh, well, you found out in the end, was it centigrade?
It was centigrade on the monitor. It was 302 degrees centigrade.
So that is a tad hot.
That's a tad hot. That's 3 times the boiling point of water. And there's a shadow moving around inside the cave, and by extrapolation for the end of the episode, that has to be Trepkos, who then destroys Firewalker's camera. Given that we see him in the cave with Firewalker, and Firewalker doesn't seem to move afterwards, so it's not 302 degrees in that cave? Or it is, and he's still alive, and Mulder's fine as well?
Not to mention the other guy who just takes Mulder down there with no protective gear.
Yeah, a lot of it. Because like I say, we're going to go into the steam caves, and it's fine, because I know every inch of this cave, I've been shot.
You do see that Trepkos has, I was going to save it for later, but very serious burns on his kind of face and arms as well.
He does.
Which would infer that if he'd got these kind of third-degree burns in such a unclean, dirty environment, he probably wouldn't be too well by now.
No.
I mean, they say that you should hospitalise yourself if you have a burn that's bigger than the palm of your hands, and these cover like half his body.
True. I think the implication in the episode is he was willing to die very quickly afterwards, but
he's still doing remarkably well. He's been down there for some time at this stage, with his severe burns.
Yeah.
That don't seem to be causing him any pain whatsoever, which is probably a bad sign with severe burns.
Yeah, he should go to the hospital or be medevaced, but then again, he won't because he's actually fine, but won't. The ending's very confusing. It's like Howard Gordon admitted there is some elements of ice in the episode.
Like the plot.
I don't think he said the plot, but he was trying to say there's bits of ice in there, but it's almost the same thing. It's isolated crew of scientists delve down deeper than they would do normally, bring sample back up, that sample infects everyone. The actual way the pathogen operates seems to alter partway through. It's meant to be like cordyceps, is what they're going for.
Cordyceps being the very famous zombie fungus, as kind of adapted into The Last of Us more recently. Cordyceps, as I understand it in nature, it works by manipulating its hosts, which are invariably insects, into moving into high places.
Then dropping, isn't it?
Yeah, it will either be they're predated by other animals because they're more obvious, or it will be able to spread its spores, which will fall over a wider distance because the insect's high up.
I can see extrapolating from cordyceps to create, a zombie plague thing like The Last of Us. But in Firewalker, it seems to erupt out of the host's throat, spread the spores out, and that's it.
It does especially note as well that the spores are only infectious in that 1 second and then they die.
Yeah, and that feels very much like...
It's purely to save Scully's life
Yes.
later in the episode.
It was a whole... That was written, they wrote in and someone said, well, how's Scully going to survive this? Oh, well, okay, so if they can't... Or how can they go and pick up Tanaka's body without getting infected?
You've got later as well when Shawnee Smith's character is infected and is about to spread her spores, if that doesn't sound horribly grotesque. She handcuffs herself to Scully before she does so, which implies, like ice, that the creature is trying to replicate itself.
Yeah.
I would have bought that more if there'd been more panic in Shawnee Smith, if it had been the more she's realised she's dying, she grabs Scully and panics.
Yeah.
But there's the deliberateness in that, which makes it feel more like it's not her in a panic, it's her or the fungus trying to replicate itself and ensure there is a host there to do so.
And that's the behaviour described by Trepkos at the end, but it's not how Tanaka behaves, because Tanaka then flees into the woods.
It's kind of not the behaviour he describes of the opening kill guy either.
No.
Because he mentions the fact, it sounded a bit more like the dinner table scene in Alien, where he collapsed and everyone else got infected because they rushed in to see what was wrong with him.
Yeah. And he was fine because he'd been wrapped up with his lab. It's 2 episodes glued together really badly, and both of them are ice. As will have been noted before, I had problems where the motivations in ice shifted halfway through the episode from paranoia aggressiveness to trying to infect others. And Firewalker has exactly the same trap, apparently.
But it kind of lacks something that ice has. It might be in part that they're not as isolated.
Yeah, well, yeah, they can. There's nothing cutting them off because they actually can call in the medevac team very quickly, and there's nothing keeping them isolated. And they also have the seeming infighting in the paranoia stuff, which is based on almost nothing.
Yeah.
They just suddenly start doing it. The other problem I found watching the episode through again is it feels like the first few minutes really keep belaboring the same point. Because we get the cold open with Firewalker in the video and everything. And then we get to see Mulder and Scully watch that video again. And it's a case of, surely you could have merged those 2 scenes together.
Yeah, true.
Because it just feels like we're getting reiterating of there's a shadow moving on the room, which also then doubly affects the whole, but you don't do anything with the shadow. Because no one believes it can be a human shadow, and if no one believes it's a human shadow, that's your silicon-based life form, which doesn't show up. I'm thinking of the Star Trek episode with the silicon-based life form.
I do agree that based on Firewalker's readouts, we should comment on this a bit more. The fact that the shadow's something big as well. It casts a shadow over the human body, so you get an idea that this thing is at least human-sized, and it's surviving in temperatures that are massively hotter than a human could survive in, even for a little bit of time.
And intelligent enough to destroy the camera.
Yeah.
Rather than just the whole robot.
It already infers the fact that the robot's been immobilized, because at the start they say all they can move is the camera.
Exactly. So I just don't understand what's going on.
It's funny that we take the entire episode from the name of Firewalker when that's its purpose served as well, is just providing that little bit of footage at the start.
I can't help but feel that Howard Gordon wants to call this episode Fire, and then someone had to remind him that we already had a fire.
But also, when you're going for your being that can survive in extreme heat, Firewalker would be a name to describe a creature such as that.
Yes.
A creature that can literally walk on fire.
It's possibly also worth commenting on, was someone thinking of Twin Peaks at the time?
Fire, walk with me.
Yep. Very hard to ignore that one as well.
No, this is very true. It is one of the most memorable lines and the name of the kind of companion book to Twin Peaks.
Exactly. Unfortunately, I don't think any of this is actually noted anywhere. It might be in an episode commentary, but we haven't watched those. The most interesting thing I think, though, about the opening scene with Mulder and Scully, though, is Mulder is concerned if Scully's well enough to go back to work. And it comes back to, again, the problem of our compressed timelines for this season of, it's a good point, of she's literally just come out of a coma in hospital, and the very next episode, she's going off into the field. There should be another episode here.
I presume the FBI has procedures for this. You'd have to pass some kind of medical or psych exam or something like that.
Absolutely, but it's the whole thing, we should see that, like have the Scully coming back to work episode, a very mundane thing where Mulder has to go off, split his attention between whatever Scully's doing to be proved ready for work and going off and investigating something.
True, that would be better for Scully's development.
Yeah, it just feels like, because they've had to alter other timelines, there was an episode that should have gone here that hasn't. And Firewalker shouldn't be the first thing after One Breath.
We have discussed that already, though, with Gillian Anderson's pregnancy.
Oh, yeah.
They were their hands were tied for this season.
True, but at this point, though, they're past the complications, though, so they can literally do anything at this point.
You also don't know how long a time has passed between these episodes. X-Files is always a bit woolly on the time frames. This could be months after Scully's coma.
But then Mulder is still concerned about her going back out in the field, so...
I think you always would be, though, even if it had been 3 months and this was her first day back, you'd still be a bit worried about her, wouldn't you?
It's true. Interesting as well, though, we've got Dana Scully, humanist, again, despite her terrible bedside manner. When they first get to the site, Pierce is really concerned with the damage to the instruments, with the 20 million or so they've actually sort of spent on the stuff, and Scully's concerned about... Yeah, but Scully's concerned about the humans who were in the lab and no one's heard from them.
Scully has said before that she's on the side of the victims, though. Of course, you'd be worried that there were 3 people, I think it is. Still unaccounted for?
3 people unaccounted for. Well, 4 if you count Trepkos.
If you count Trepkos, 4.
I think we're going to just get out of the way of yes, this episode is wholly derivative device, because most of my notes are just, they go into the lab and it's been destroyed, like in ice.
We could talk about the kind of organism that could survive in a volcano, which I presume is what we're getting at with the silicone-based things.
Yes, I think it's, Mulder does go over a bit of it's a theoretical idea that since silicon is so similar to carbon, you could theoretically have a carbon-based life form. Sorry, silicon-based life.
Boil it down to my idiot biology level, is silicon is like what sand is made out of, isn't it? Like glass.
Yes, and computer processing units.
Yeah. So it's understandable how, I guess we can extrapolate from that something that's genetic makeup was based around silicone could survive in higher temperatures, for example.
Yeah. I think the certain places it falls apart, though, is, as is touched on in the episode, is to sort of mimic how carbon-based life forms work. The exhalation of a silicon-based life form would be silicon dioxide.
Okay, yeah.
Which is sand.
Oh.
So it's the whole, you can't, that's why they find sand in the person's lungs as an after effect.
Because it's kind of excreting this.
Yeah, but at the same time, you can't imagine how this is going to work really for a silicon-based life form to excrete sand.
I guess that's why in the episode they emphasise that discovering the silicone-based life form is like the biological equivalent of finding the Holy Grail.
Yes, you found something that basically has is a complete parallel to every known life form on Earth.
And therefore, it's one of those keystone things where you'd have to then evaluate what you think of biology on the basis of this.
Yes. It's like the idea behind Firewalker, the finding this weird thing down in the heart of a volcano, that's great.
Which you can understand why Trepkos was so excited about this on that basis.
Yeah, and why he got interested. It's not clear, though, why he turns into Colonel Kurtz by way of the deer hunter, though.
Yeah, I definitely got both Colonel Kurtz vibe and deer hunter vibe.
His costume is deer hunter, and his whole attitude is Colonel Kurtz.
I think it's the stereotypical, when you think of somebody flipping their crazy switch, Colonel Kurtz comes to mind these days. So X-Files has done a couple of Colonel Kurtz-ish characters so far.
It is, but is this revelation really enough to do that to you? It doesn't feel like it's fundamentally shaking the core of your being.
He was a hair away just from lying in a corner whispering the horror, the horror.
Exactly. But it's why have you reacted so strongly to this? And, destroying the lab and...
I know, it's quite upsetting seeing a giant mushroom erupt out of your friend's throat. I can understand being a tad disturbed by this.
I can understand being a tad disturbed by that. But everyone else seems to be coping fine. I mean, admittedly, they are living in a lab with the power turned off and killing anyone who comes in, for some reason. But then Mulder knows that they're not doing that. They specifically target him because he's not someone they know. They're already infected at this point, so they should want them to come in so they can infect them, but instead he tries to attack Mulder?
It's either way you want to look at it is they're infected, they've seen somebody die of this condition, so either they're being controlled by the mushroom and it wants them to reproduce, in which case it would want more hosts.
Yeah.
Or they've seen what the mushroom can do and they're in full control of their faculties. They'd want someone like Scully there researching a cure very, very fast.
Yeah. And we've got neither. Have we? It's sort of, their behaviour doesn't make any sense.
No, they must know that they're going to die, and yet they're trying to... It's not even self-quarantine, they're just trying to stymie any attempts to help them.
Yeah. I don't know, it's like either you've just followed ISIS plot beats all the way down without understanding why those plot beats were in place, or you've really changed your mind about what the episode is about halfway through. Which will be a common theme with both these episodes, I think. Weirdly.
Yeah, we'll get to Red Museum when we get to Red Museum, sadly.
Very true. There was a moment where basically Trepkos is paralleled to Mulder. Pursuit of the truth eclipsed the truth. Being so focused on something like aliens and overlooking the human cost. It's like Mulder is focused on finding evidence of the paranormal, and we've seen so far he is actually willing to sacrifice humans along the way if he gets his evidence.
Including traumatized 8-year-old girls.
Yeah, Scully is the exception today, but traumatized 8-year-old girls, Dwayne Barry, which I think of another example of season 1, who he just sort of tossed by the wayside. The people in Conduit.
Yeah.
I mean, he was trying to put it in for a bit, but he didn't actually sort of worry that much when Scully sold them out.
Yeah.
We talked about Scully's psychic family connection. Mulder definitely has some psychic things, or he can read the script.
Where are you getting this from in this episode?
This was after Tanaka sort of rolls off the gurney and rushes out into the woods and falls down an incline, and basically they're going to go down and help him, and Mulder stops Ludwig going. It's like, no, stay back! And then his throat explodes. Because of, Mulder, how do you know this is going to happen?
No, I guess the most that they should know is, I think at that stage, Tanaka has looked poorly for a while, and you think we would have quarantined him before now, not wanting to question Scully's first aid skills in any way. You think, harking back to ICE, we would have put this very sweaty, feverish man in isolation. But I think they have also seen his throat bulge, and from that you've got to extrapolate Mulder, realise that something would burst out of his throat or something like that.
I think it's a bit of a stretch, though, to burst out his throat, though, rather than just there's something in his esophagus.
That's probably alive as well, because it's swelling.
Yeah, but still, the idea of it bursting out of your throat rather than the very much easier of coming out through the mouth, given the same passageway.
No, I'm going to give them this.
It's gross, yeah.
It's gross, and it's a really cool effect. It looks nice
but it does
in a very phallic way, but it's a nice-looking effect that's suitably creepy and disgusting. A bit like coughing up the tapeworms the fluke worms in Host.
Yeah. It does a biology, though. It's much easier, rather than bursting through the skin, to come up through the airway.
Yeah, but again, we're treating it like cordyceps as well, which tends to grow up through the skull.
Well, okay.
Or, the insect's head, anyway.
Scully at least suggests that the spore could explain Trepkos, though there's no evidence he is ever infected. At least he's managed to withstand this whole process much longer than anyone else.
It's inferred he's not infected because he wasn't present at the time, and we kind of follow this theory that the spores can only give root the second they leave the thing. If they've had a chance to settle, they don't infect people.
But I mean, there's an insinuation at least that the spores could be causing him to be really paranoid as he is. And it is actually a thing of we don't know that the infection is always the same. I mean, it could be that it's infected him and it's done something different to his brain chemistry than everyone else.
True, but if he's breathed it in, you'd think this thing would have been growing in his lungs, which would have been invariably fatal like everyone else.
Oh, yeah. Well, but isn't this the whole... Sorry, I just realised you could then extend this into the episode of, yeah, he did inhale the spore with everyone else, but he's been living in the volcano and the high heat makes it inactive.
Yeah, that would have worked.
Sorry, guys, for fixing your episode post-haste, but that would then explain why he spent all this time living in the cave and why he sacrificed himself at the end.
It's something to do with the steam. He's specifically in the steam caves.
Come on, guys. I do feel as well, we've just kind of, when we get to that point in the episode, it's just a case of Mulder says, I need to go to this place, and points to the steam caves. And they go, but why, Mulder?
Presumably it's because where the Firewalker saw this shadow.
True, the 302-degree place.
Yeah, but we've already established the fact that apparently humans are absolutely fine at 3 times the temperature of boiling water.
All the measurements are wrong, which case Firewalker's a rubbish robot then. I do kind of like, though, that Trepkos is really overdramatic when he kills Ludwig. So, of all the things to use, a flare gun, I will admit that basically you're not going to have many other things on hand. But flare gun, that's more dramatic than normal.
It's supposed to be a really painful way to die as well.
So he's not even being nice to them, he's just sort of shooting him with the worst thing he possibly could.
Well, naturally you would have lost your sympathy for them by this point, I'm sure.
Depends how much you subscribe to the whole sort of they're being controlled by a weird volcanic fungus.
We don't even really get a clear idea where this fungus might have come from. In ice, it's specified the fact that it might have come in on a meteor.
Yeah, here we get it's some porous obsidian they noticed when Firewalker is down in the caldera, is the best we get.
And they released the original spores, I believe, because they thought it was a rock and pulverized it.
Yeah, which
again differs from the way it's supposed to reproduce by only being infectious the second it explodes.
Yeah, it's one of those, the life cycle doesn't make any sense, whereas ice is a lot more elegant with the whole it's in the ice sample and basically someone didn't wash their hands or wasn't wearing gloves or something spilled. There's like a load of different ways that someone could have been infected in ice. We do have the interesting as well of, much like ice and much like Darkness Falls, the government comes in and this time they don't blow it up, but they do quarantine the site.
And we've got to presume the sample then disappears because, as previously noted, they've got this groundbreaking silicon-based life form that's evidently not going to see the light of day.
Yeah, well, I get the impression that Tremkos destroyed the samples, so they can't see those, but yeah, you have a good point of how are these samples still viable outside of a host if Scully says they die instantly.
And Scully comments the fact that she couldn't cultivate it either.
Yeah.
Admittedly, Scully is not a biologist.
Yes. Well, Scully also said she simulated the temperature of the volcano, and it's, are you sure about this, Scully? 302 degrees? Maybe. Anything above that, you're going to struggle a bit.
It depends where we're judging this temperature from. If it is the 302 degrees, sure, she can emulate that in a lab.
Yeah.
If we're going for the actual core temperature of a volcano, it's probably less likely.
There's a reason why people don't play with magma on a regular basis.
You had the utter lack of subtlety I felt as well in, evidently, was it Howard Gordon you said our scriptwriter this time?
That's him.
Just decided he was going to write into the script that he couldn't explain himself, because it had the most overused analogy of the blind men finding the elephant.
Yes, which I referenced right at the start of this.
Which we always use in sci-fi to... It's like the Simpsons joke with when there's anything we can't explain, we just said a wizard do it. So if we can't explain this sci-fi concept, we'll just say blind men trying to touch an elephant and not understanding what they see. Yeah, that explained it. Off we go, boys.
And it's not even true, though, because it's a case of the whole point of the blind man thing is people aren't seeing the whole, they're only seeing parts of it.
Yeah, that's it. It's not supposed to be that you're not understanding what something is.
Whereas in Firewalker, it's a case of we brought the sample up and infected ourselves with it. That's got nothing to do with the elephant analogy.
Yeah, in case you haven't heard it before, the blind man and the elephant is supposed to be if 3 blind men were to encounter an elephant and touch different parts, they'd each get a different idea of what the whole creature was like. So the one that touches its trunk might think it looks like a snake. The one that touches its leg might think it looks like a tree. Because the idea is that with their limited perception, they're only feeling one small part of the bigger picture. So, as Nick says, it's not what we have here in this episode whatsoever. It's just weird to use that analogy.
Again, I think we're trying to be pretentious.
Very much so.
I mean, again, you can absolutely use that. I mean, I think off the top of my head, the best you would have is to make that equivalence. You need to have something like the xenomorphs from Aliens. Because that would be a case of if you encountered each different point of the life cycle, you'd have a radically different impression of what this creature is.
Or if you'd only seen the Queen or something like that.
Yeah, and you need to be step backwards to see the entire life cycle to realise it's one creature. But yeah, that's the elephant where you're not seeing the whole thing.
You could argue that about any kind of insectoid creature. Like,
yeah,
maybe if you'd seen the creatures from Darkness Falls at a different part of their life cycle. Because bugs metamorphose.
Yeah. Fungus, though, I don't think we know. The fungus, unless it
develops... mushroom is a mushroom is a mushroom.
Unless it does turn into a mobile creature that did wreck Firewalker's camera somehow at the start, and then Trepkos never met it.
I think we're all clear that was Trepkos' shadow at the start.
So the episode is fundamentally broken, I think.
I would have loved to see the final stage of this creature's evolution as a giant fungus monster, though. I would like to expand my discourse into Scully Doesn't Know First Aid to Dana Scully and laboratory safety standards.
Yeah, that's probably fair.
We have an unknown organism, indeed an unknown silicone-based, potentially, organism that Scully's experimenting on, with no kind of safety goggles, safety mask, anything else. And indeed, her way of saving herself when she's handcuffed to Jessie is to put a door between them and just kind of press her back to the door, leaving this big gap around the outside of the door, while Scully, let's note again, is not wearing a mask. So I think the true miracle of Firewalker is the fact that Scully does not get infected by this fungus in any way, because of her complete lack of safety precautions on every step of this.
It's a very good point. I'm not sure what is going on there.
She doesn't know exactly what she's dealing with, but she does know enough that she should be taking more care than she actually is.
Very much so.
Especially following her experiences in both Ice and Darkness Falls as well.
Yeah. As much as silicon-based life forms are purely theoretical, and not even regular theoretical science, this is fringe theoretical stuff, the fact that she's encountered both the worms in Ice and the bugs in Darkness Falls should make this less dubious.
On top of that, she knows that whatever this life form is, at least one person who's been dealing with it directly has died.
And one of them might have gone mad as well as a result.
So you know that there is possibly, at the very least, a risk, almost certainly due to whatever this thing is. And just, the mind boggles.
It does.
I'm also going to go with the end of the episode. Is the absolute final thing we see is Trepkos carrying Jessie's body down into the steam caves, which Mulder has apparently allowed him to do, even though Trepkos has killed at least 2 people over the course of the episode. Mulder knows he's killed these people, and yet he still lets him walk off like the monster carrying the bride of Frankenstein into these caves at the end, just ending with the narration saying that Trepkos and Jessie are unaccounted for. Why?
Yeah, it's a mess of an episode that, again, it's possibly that Bride of Frankenstein thing was one of the parts that was influencing it.
From which you'd want, though, that Trepkos has become a monster in some way.
Yeah, well, again, that's why I think there's meant to be that one line from Scully that if he's infected by the spores, that might be explaining his behaviour. And that we're trying to allude to this whole, he's become a monster, he's got to dispose of the evidence so that no one else can find it. Use it as a bioweapon or something.
But you'd want some way that he's transcended it. Is either some way he can't survive away from the volcano, or he's started to look like a fungus monster or something like that.
Again, coming back to the whole, he's in the steam caves because that's keeping it at bay. Real easy fix there.
Or he can't live at a lower temperature, like a reverse Mr. Freeze or something like that.
Exactly.
I just feel there's something missing. It's not... Well, the episode is not a good episode, but no. We could make it better.
Yes, it's not actually hard to fix.
A few more rounds of script rewrites, and a lot of the issues with this episode could have been fixed, and would made it stand out from ice more than it does.
Yes, I mean, you still get the whole, this is basically ice again, but it's ice with a difference.
It would be like my argument every time I say this is another vampire story. You could have the same difference of, yes, it's another ice story, but we've done all these things to differentiate it.
Don't encourage them. We've had one vampire episode, and look what happened to that. Okay, anything else of note on this episode?
No, I think I've said enough.
So, for our second episode this week, we have Red Museum, first broadcast on the 9th of December 1994, directed by Wynne Phelps and written by Chris Carter. And our guest stars for this episode are Steve Easton as Sheriff Mazurowski, who was an umpire in Austin Powers 2, which is
fair enough.
Interesting claim to fame, and cop number 1 in Seinfeld.
Oh wow, I remember his role of cop number 1.
More interesting, though, will be Mark Ralston, who played Richard Odin, who is Drake in Aliens, his first film role.
Oh, was that his first?
That was his first film role.
Oh.
He reprised it for the Colonial Marines game as well.
Oh, cool.
He's also Steph in RoboCop 2, Boggs Diamond in The Shawshank Redemption.
Oh, yeah, he is.
Yeah, Dan Erickson in Saw 5 and Saw 6.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Appeared in Star Trek Next Generation and Enterprise, as in Babylon 5. Will appear again in The X-Files as Bud Capier in Silent Zeit in Season 7. He's Clovis in the Blade Runner game. He's in Dragon Age Origins. And, especially for you, he's in Skylanders Trap Team as various voices.
Aww.
Would you like to give us a synopsis of Red Museum? I'll rephrase that. Would you like to try and give us a synopsis of Red Museum?
I'll do my best. The episode this time begins in a beef processing plant in Wisconsin. We follow one of the workers, Beth Kane, as she leaves to go home and prepares to take a shower. She doesn't know it, but she is being spied on by some mysterious stranger through a peephole within her bathroom mirror. As she's doing this, her eldest son, Gary, receives a call that we don't hear, and he leaves the house. As he goes, he tells his brother that he will be back in 5 minutes. 4 hours later, he still hasn't returned, and Beth calls the police. Gary doesn't turn up till the following morning when he's found running around the woods in his underwear. When he's found by the local sheriff, he's confused and frightened, and as he turns around, we see that the phrase, "he is one," is written on his back in black pen. Word of the case, of course, reaches Mulder and Scully, and they review the photographs and the information related. Scully's initial thought is that it might be a school prank, but Mulder informs her that there have been other victims, and they've had to be hospitalized due to the fear and hysteria. He confirms that 2 of these victims were both in Wisconsin, and follow exactly the same pattern. He also mentions a local belief that the children are possessed. Mulder and Scully go to Delta Glen in Wisconsin and meet with Sheriff Mazurowski. He tells them about a local cult called the Church of the Red Museum. They have taken over a cattle ranch and now keep all the cattle there as pets because they believe that eating meat is some kind of barbarism. That's how the entire church has in fact got its name. Mulder wants to check out the church, and when he gets there, he sees the very distinct members of the cult, who all wear white gowns and red turbans, meeting inside a barn there. They are in the middle of a sermon given by Richard Odin, who is their leader. The sermon has a very distinct look to it, with Odin typing away at a computer while a young woman sitting next to him kind of describes what's going on. Mulder explains to Scully that the cult believe in walk-ins, which is the idea that enlightened spirits can pass into them and impart their knowledge by speaking through the person they're possessing. After Odin does notice the agent standing in the back of the room, he encourages them that they should open their hearts and minds. This ties in as the agents go to interview Gary Kane about what happened. Gary doesn't have a clear recollection of what happened to him that night. He does remember being in the woods and falling over, and he believes a spirit, possibly an animal spirit, entered his body at this time. Later that night, after Mulder and Scully have checked into their hotel and have stopped to have a delicious dinner of ribs, they are discussing the cult and its philosophy, and they see a group of teenagers picking on a young cult member outside the restaurant that Mulder manages to chase them off. As he does so, one of the bullies reveal themselves to be the sheriff's son, whose name is Rick, which doesn't tally really with what the sheriff told them earlier in the episode, in the fact that the sheriff believed that the cult members kept to themselves, and the villagers, although they didn't like them, didn't really bother them much either. Later that evening, we see Rick driving his girlfriend home. As the girlfriend leaves Rick, she hears a strange noise and finds a whimpering dog in the alley. While she's distracted by this dog, she's attacked from behind and kind of drugged and abducted. The following day, this woman is seen wandering in the woods in her bra and underwear, seemingly terrified by hallucinations of insects and crows that she sees as she goes through. When she's found, she is one written on her back, as Gary did. Scully examines her and finds trace amounts of what she believes to be an opiate in her systems, as well as high levels of a drug known as scopolamine. This is a drug that's used to treat motion sickness, but becomes a really, really strong anesthetic and hallucinogen if used in excess. It's a controlled substance, it can only be purchased by doctors, which lead Mulder and Scully to suspect Richard Odin, the leader of the cult, because he used to be a doctor. They, of course, use this information to arrest Dr. Odin. He is taken to the sheriff's office where he claims that he knows what scopolamine is but has never worked with it himself. However, when Mulder asks if his religion allows for revenge, Odin replies that the meat-eaters will be cleansed, which does not sound terribly good for him. Immediately outside the sheriff's office, the cult members begin a non-violent protest, barricading the sidewalk and attempting to convert others. Rick runs by with a large bucket which turns out to be filled with cow blood, which he dumps on the person reading the sermon before the sheriff chases him away. During the kind of furore that follows, Scully notices an old man in a pickup truck kind of indicating to her. He says he wants to show them something and drives them out to the pastures outside the town. Here they see a pair of men injecting cows with a kind of growth hormone. The old man tells them that there is something wrong with this substance, that he's noticed that people in the town have become mean and spiteful after consuming meat that has been grown using this hormone. He even says that in the last year there have been 7 rapes by high school boys, which is completely out the norm for their little sleepy town. We also see in the kind of panning shot that one of these 2 men doing the injectings is wearing glasses, which immediately makes him look like the person that was spying on Beth Kane at the start of the episode. The episode then abruptly cuts to nighttime when a young pilot and someone who's later identified as Dr. Gerald Larson are together in a small plane. We notice that Larson is clutching a metal briefcase to himself and something has gone wrong. The young man flying the plane indicates they're not going to make it and they're going to have to make an emergency landing. At this point, the pilot loses all control of the plane, it stalls, crashes, and bursts into flames. Firefighters arrive at the scene the following morning along with Scully, Mulder, and the sheriff. It's revealed that Dr. Larson is a local doctor who delivered the sheriff's boy when he was born. The briefcase is shown. It contains money and a bag which contains a vial of an unknown chemical. Scully researches Dr. Larson further and discovers that all of the children who were abducted were delivered by him, even those that were in different locations and were not found in Wisconsin. Other items found within the briefcase are shown to be credit card numbers which belong to the victims' families. Mulder suggests that this might have been used in order to track them. We also then cut back to the 2 men who are injecting the hormones. The guy with the glasses leaves, but then somebody in a blue car pulls up and speaks to his partner. The person who has just pulled up shoots the other man who was injecting with growth hormones, seemingly without warning, and we see that it's the crew cut man, the assassin in Erlen Mayer Flask who killed Deep Throat. With this information about Dr. Larson in hand, Scully heads back to the Kane house and speaks with Beth about Gary. Beth mentions that Gary has never been sick in his life, but had been seeing Dr. Larson to get vitamin shots as a preventative measure. She mentions the fact that her husband had been somewhat worried about this, especially as Gary seemed to not be developing very quickly. However, then her husband had had a sudden fatal accident at the meat packing plant, and they're obviously, following the said discussions about it had stopped and Gary had continued to get the injections. While they're speaking to Beth, Mulder notices the pinpoint of life from behind the bathroom mirror and punches through it to find that there is a small room which includes a tripod-mounted camera and a stack of videotapes. That night, Rick and his friend are drinking beer late into the night when Rick is attacked, as his girlfriend was before, by the unknown assailant. By the time his friend, who has left the car to urinate, returns to it, Rick is gone. He is found the following morning lying face down on the ground, showing the "he is one" words written on his back. However, he has been killed with a gunshot wound to the forehead. We then see, in a cutaway, Crew Cut Man putting a pistol into the trunk of his car, presumably revealing the fact that he is the killer. Scully manages to identify the man who was hiding behind the wall in McCain's house filming. He is indeed the guy who was present at the doping of the cattle. His name is Gerd Thomas. While they are heading to interview Thomas, they pass Crew Cut Man driving in the opposite direction. Scully locks eyes with him and recognizes his face, but she doesn't immediately remember where she has seen him from before. As Thomas is taken in for questing, he folds to being a pervert rather fast, just confessing that he is a sick man. He reveals he is the one who kidnapped all the kids, but when he's told about Rick's death, he panics and says that he never killed anyone. He tells the agents that he loved the kids. He wrote on their back because they had become monsters due to Dr. Larson's test. He also tells Mulder that Larson was the one using the children to inoculate cattle with some unknown substance. Scully, at this point, remembers who Crew Cut Man is and leaves the room. She returns to tell Mulder that she believes that Gerd Thomas is actually telling the truth. The toxicology tests that they took from Rick's body could not be analysed because they contain compounds derived from purity control, which is the weird alien DNA sample that they found in the Erlenmeyer flask. Scully then tells Mulder that the Crew Cut Man is the one who killed Deep Throat. Mulder decides that he wants to take Crew Cut Man alive to get more information relating to this. Mulder arranges with the Church of the Red Museum to take in the remaining children and keep them safe. Meanwhile, Mulder goes alone to the beef processing plant and finds the Crew Cut Men preparing to burn the building. After a scuffle, in which Mulder drops his gun, the Crew Cut Man locks Mulder in a beef locker and prepares to ignite the building. Scully, the sheriff, and other police officers arrive, and there is a short standoff which ends when the sheriff shoots and kills the Crew Cut Man and breaks down sobbing.
Thank you. There's so much to talk about for Red Museum. It's difficult to know where to start at times.
Yeah, I'm sorry. My summary felt a bit all over the place for that one because the episode's a bit all over the place, mainly.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that on Wikipedia and on most of the wikis, there's no commentary from Chris Carter himself. There's some stuff from Morgan and Wong, who both don't like the episode.
I'm not surprised, really.
I will go for the start of the weirdest aspect of the episode is it was intended to be a crossover with a series called Picket Fences.
Okay.
What's curious about this is they had it all planned out and a lot of it arranged before checking with CBS, which is the people who make Picket Fences. Because it's not Fox, so this is a different...
Oh, this is a different...
network entirely.
I see.
So basically they'd need to sort of hash out between them to actually get them to okay it. And no one had actually asked CBS if they could do it.
Okay.
And CBS said no. The weird upshot of this is that Red Museum has had all of the crossover elements scrubbed out. But the relevant episode of Picket Fences didn't, because there are a few allusions to Red Museum in there, and a few mentions to Dr. Larson.
That's interesting.
So yeah, there's the other half of the crossover is actually still there, kind of.
Oh, curious.
Don't know if you actually want to watch Picket Fences. I think it's a police procedural thing, rather than supernatural.
So it's not a sci-fi or anything?
Not as far as I'm aware.
Oh.
Possibly one of the weirdest aspects, along with Chris, what have you done? I don't understand this episode.
It's another episode that's kind of weird because as a Monster of the Week episode, I thought it has promise. The central premise is curious, that opening with the kid found dazed in the woods with weird writing on his back. It's like, yeah, I'm curious, I want to know what's going on. And then halfway through the episode, it suddenly becomes a conspiracy episode.
Yeah. I mean, just to start with the writing on the back is... I think it's great as a cold open, but I have a sneaky suspicion they did that, started writing the episode, and then got to the point where it's a case of, what does it even mean? And couldn't justify it, because that whole she is one, he is one, that's great. As a whole, that's something really sinister. And we do find out what that means, but Gerd, what did you want to happen afterwards? Because you've just marked these kids, traumatized them, and drugged them. Because?
I feel it's one of two ways. Is that perhaps Gerd I'm not saying he should have gone further, but it would have made more sense if he'd killed them and then written this message.
Yeah, that way, because that's surely what he was going for, because these kids are dangerous because they've been injected with the Maya Flask contents.
He calls them monsters,
yeah.
So he must have some idea that whatever Dr. Larson's done has changed them in some way.
And also, but it's not complete enough, because Rick, he's a complete bastard, and we don't like him.
Mm.
His girlfriend, she's culpable, but not as bad. Steve, at the start, is just a teenager. Gary is just a teenager.
Yeah, it's... Even when... I know the sheriff sugarcoats all this, because the sheriff makes Rick sound like a saint as well. But they say that this kid is just like a member of the football team or something. He's just normal teenage boy.
Okay, so sure, if he was one of the rapists that they mentioned at the start, okay, we'll go for that.
I've got to assume, based on his behaviour, that the rapists are people like Rick.
Yeah.
Because Rick is an absolute douchebag.
Yes. Just picking on the Red Museum people for no reason
and even becoming aggressive with Mulder and Scully until they realise that Scully's got a gun.
Mulder and Scully don't identify themselves as FBI. They just catch a glimpse of Scully's gun. It's a case of, I'm pretty sure you're meant to identify yourselves in this capacity.
Mm.
That usually makes people back down, at least think twice.
Pull out your little badge.
Yeah, that's the whole point. That's one of the points of it, I think. Kind of difficult to know is that. I mean, we could actually just do this as two halves, because we have the Red Museum Monster of the Week half, and we have the conspiracy half.
The flip is definitely that scene in the middle with the aeroplane, where it's suddenly like, my goodness, have I skipped to the next episode?
Yeah. So should we try that for this one?
We'll start with talking about the Red Museum.
Yeah. So I think, as you actually said to me when we watched it again, is why is this episode called Red Museum, given they are an enormous red herring? Like, on the scale of, they have literally nothing to do with anything.
It actually turns out they are totally benign.
They're totally benign. They're also the only people who are safe. And actually, that's more the conspiracy side again. Sorry, try and compartmentalize.
It's the only way they kind of are merged into the conspiracy plot.
And that's really weak, though, because we'll get to the implications of the conspiracy side at the end of this, which is the whole, you probably need to do something with this, and I don't think you do, and that's bad.
So basically, they deliberately off-put you with them because they are, it turns out, a peaceable cult.
Yeah, complete pacifists.
But they are portrayed as being sort of militant vegans.
Yeah.
So they are quite aggressive. They are very negative about anyone who doesn't eat meat, which in turn off-puts you and makes you think would they be so unhappy with people who eat meat that they would hurt them?
Yeah. I think you also, the red turbans feels a bit of a whole, that feels like a very 90s thing to denote religious things. And you need a justification for why you've done that, because that's very associated with Sikhs and not outside that.
It calls them a church, but they're more like Buddhist monks as well. When you see them, I know they kind of dress like Sikhs, but you've got this more idea of a Buddhist commune.
But they're all white.
They're all staggeringly white, despite wearing
turbans,
red turbans and like very, very formless robes.
Yeah, it's a case of, I think you've got some prejudices here, guys, that you didn't examine when you wrote this episode.
It's more the idea of, I think, if we put them in turbans, this is exotic or something like that, in that sort of misguided 90s way of thinking.
Yeah. And we also get the sheriff, who is the person who decides to advance the possession idea. In this case of, you're a law enforcement agency, isn't it? So grounds for you being fired for saying this.
It's kind of expanding on the idea of what a walk-in is either. As we've seen walk-ins already in the X-Files, because that's what Lazarus is about.
Yes.
It's the idea of, if somebody's spirit vacates their body, another spirit could just immediately pop into there, which isn't exactly kind of how it appears in this episode, but the idea that you can invite other spirits into your body for a little while to learn from them.
Yeah.
I believe the idea with walk-ins is supposed to be there's no kind of emotion attached to it. It's purely gaining the knowledge from someone else. So you're getting their memories and ideas without their actual personality.
Yeah, which is an interesting thing to get into, but we don't focus on that one either.
And you don't even find out if it's genuine.
No. Because we all we know is these kids are being drugged, and again, we get back to, we don't know why, or what the hope for this was, other than highlighting them. Which just, yes, okay, you got the FBI's attention, but then what?
I think we're getting to the conspiracy side
know,
again. It's not
difficult.
as clear-cut as you think. But the idea with it's a control group, isn't it? It's like a more organised version of Blood.
Yeah.
So you've got we're doing this experiment that involves both inoculated children and tampering with meat products with some kind of unknown substance. We're doing it in this specific town because there is a large proportion of vegetarians that can act as our control group.
is Richard Odin actually involved in it? Is he leading the control group? Does he know full well what's actually happening?
I don't think he actually does, though.
No, I don't think he does.
I think it's just the coincidence of we've got this area that has a religious group, so we've got a large number of people that we know will not consume the meat product.
Yeah.
And obviously haven't been inoculated either, because they're not parts of Dr. Odin's... Not Dr. Odin. Dr. Larson's clinic.
Still weak.
Yeah, it's a weak connection, but that's purely the purpose of Red Museum. I'm not sure I made it clear, actually. There's a really specific reason why they're called the Church of the Red Museum. It's specifically the ranch.
Oh, yeah.
Because they've taken over a cattle ranch, turned the 100 meat cattle there into pets, and have declared it something like a monument to the barbarism that is the meat industry, which is why it is the Church of the Red Museum. The Red Museum being the meat industry. And it's...
Yeah, no.
We're justifying giving this episode a really cool title, basically.
Basically, yeah. And Odin with his weird religious ceremony, I mean, okay, so maybe Odin isn't a great orator, but then he's the leader of this group, so he should be a good orator. It's a whole... He sits on a computer and types out the words that someone sitting behind him will display on the screen and then repeat to the congregation. What is going on? Can you not prepare this beforehand? Is this some kind of beat poetry you're doing as you're sort of writing it?
He just communicates as well while he's doing this, so you'd think that he could just be possessed by whatever being is possessing him and speak.
If that's what they're going for, sure.
Yeah.
But that's not clear either. It just seems to be, I'm typing out my speech on a word processor. You can read out for me.
I think it's just that trick that, they used to use in seances, ghostwriting.
Yeah.
Where, somebody closes their eyes and the spirit moves through them and moves the pencil in their hand. You were trying to get a tech version of that.
I can see that.
It used to be a trick that they used to do in seances, where the medium doing the seance would allow themselves to be possessed and relay messages in this way.
And the problem in both cases is clearly the person doing the writing knows exactly what they're doing.
And it's a trick.
And it's a trick.
They're either very good at writing with their eyes closed or they're fooling this in some way.
The computer thing actually gives you a level worse because there's a few programs around which are called hacker typers.
Okay.
And basically this is to simulate what you see on film. So basically you have your keyboard and your program set up with a pre-programmed bit of text. No matter what keys you hit on the keyboard, it will start printing out the right letters.
Clever.
So the point is, though, that him sending out the keyboard, they could have programmed it in so no matter what keys he presses, it writes out that sermon. So
that's neat.
So more so than the Victorian scam, it's even easier to do with technology than it was with just writing with your eyes closed.
So you're not even using some kind of trick like having marks on the keys or something
memorizing
like that.
It. No, yeah, you've literally just the computer programmed to do it. And that's much more less impressive because, yeah, you can cheat so many ways.
Oh, it's nifty. I like that.
It's just a fun thing to do. On films where you see people going, "I've hacked the Gibson."
I suppose it works well when you always see hackers in films who can hack type 10 times faster than a normal person can,
and just scroll through all the windows and everything. In case, how are you doing that? Use a mouse. It's easier. Okay, so sticking to the Red Museum, the non-conspiracy side of it, we do get a nice skull at the moment. It's a bit weirdly invasive from Mulder, but it's there.
When Scully immediately goes from meatpacking plants to needing ribs.
Yeah, and also for the conspiracy side of it, Scully, are you not worried at the end what you've eaten?
True.
Because I'm sure they'll have locally sourced beef.
When I was studying ethics in school, we went to a animal rights protest just, as part of our course to give us something to write about. And I can safely say that after going to that, I would not have fancied ribs afterwards. No. After seeing all these pictures of slaughterhouses and things like that. So Scully evidently has less empathy than most, I feel.
Well, again, she is the person with no bedside manner. She's trying with Stevie this week.
I suppose she's also a forensic scientist, so maybe seeing all this stuff about animals being slaughtered and stuff wouldn't affect her in the same way.
She's compartmentalizing. But we've got Scully wiping her mouth in a very out-of-the-blue intimate moment, which is, I don't know, is that sweet or is it a bit condescending that she couldn't do it herself?
I think you take it sweet.
You do take it sweet, but, you could just sort of tap them across the mouth. I think it's
normally you say, you got something in the corner of your mouth.
Yeah. Not just reach across the table and start wiping, cleaning them up for them.
I can start if you want.
Well, yeah. So we've got douchebag Rick, which I don't think we've got anything more to say about really, other than he's a very, very 90s teen bully.
got to admit, it always sounds terrible when you say it in the episode, but it's like, you don't feel sad that he gets shot at the end?
No,
oh,
not
no,
really.
not
No.
Rick.
Oh, I cared about him so much.
He's irredeemable.
Yeah.
There's no good side to Rick.
And his girlfriend, who then gets grabbed because they've tied a dog up behind the bins.
It's a weird way to get someone's attention.
I think it's the undercutting of the tension, because your opening sting again is great with the whole, he received a phone call.
You never find out who it is.
No. And he walks out and never comes back in again, and they find him next wood wandering the woods. So you've got a whole range of things that could have done that to him.
Mm.
You suspect human because what monster is going to write in black marker?
And also the fact that he evidently knew whoever it was who called him, otherwise he wouldn't have gone out.
Exactly. But for her, it's a case of, we've tied your dog up behind the bins, he's whimpering, and now we're going to chloroform you. And you've removed quite a bit of that tension there, because it's a person.
You haven't had to lure any of the others away. Maybe it's the fact that Gary was a bit harder to get because he's at home every night or something.
It could be, but he sort of ran out of the place without any problem, didn't he?
Mm. You also have the weirdness of Gary's testimony, because he's the only one that they properly interview, and he muddies the waters a bit by talking about how he felt an animal spirit move through him, which, fair enough, he was absolutely tripping at the time, and probably did feel an animal spirit move through him on that basis.
Well, I'm guessing for her, then that's got to be the whole weird stuff with the ravens is probably
And
what
the
they're trying to go for.
cockroaches.
Yeah, but that does not come across in the episode as like that, does it?
No. He's the only one who muddies the waters and makes it sound like it is the Red Museum with his weird testimony about animal spirits.
And then, of course, that leads us to Richard Odin with his former life being Doug Herman. And it feels like that's another... This is all misleading, though, because it's a case of surely that could have been something then, but no, he just used to be a doctor, and now he's a religious leader.
You've also got your symbolism with all the hallucinations of ravens when he's Dr. Odin.
Yes.
The raven god of Norse mythology.
And does that go anywhere?
Absolutely
No.
not. But again, just muddying your water further.
We're almost to the midway point, so we're going to complain about what we do with conspiracy in this one, but... And then we have that protest in the middle of the street where they do the carry thing and throw the blood over the adherents.
It's very much a kind of reversal of the kind of things that PETA did. There was that whole thing with PETA throwing buckets of blood over fashion models who are wearing fur and things like that. But bizarrely, they toss them over the peaceful vegetarians in this one.
But then we have a sequence which is kind of integral to the episode, but also feels framed really bizarrely, because Scully notices the grizzled farmer, who nods her over and says, "I've got something to show you and your partner." And he drives them out to the middle of nowhere.
Oh boy, everybody, let's get in the weirdo's car.
And it's kind of, guys, do you think this might be a trap? Who's going to kill you? And it's like, oh, also you've got something to show me. Oh, there it is. What, the field? It's just...
With one cow in it.
You can't see that first, can you? You can just see the wide open field. In this case of, you're looking at it. We are? It's like, oh, those people who are inoculating the cows. Could you not have told us in town? All you have to say is, they're inoculating cows in the area with a substance that hasn't passed the FDA, or possibly has passed the FDA, but no one knows what's in it.
The one that got stuck in my head while I was watching that scene was there is a Brit comedy called The IT Crowd, and there is one character in that who's desperately trying to seduce a female staff member, and he just keeps inviting her to his office to point at the dead flies on the windowsill.
2 of them now.
Look! Pointing. It's just what got stuck in my head with this guy pointing at his empty field. I've got something to show you. Look over there.
To be fair, I'm not sure if it is his field.
It is. He says it's his ranch.
Oh, it is his field, okay.
His grandfather's ranch.
Okay.
Because it's his argument of the fact that his grandfather used to have a modest ranch and they've essentially been driven out of business by these people who are GMing cows to be bigger than they should be.
Yeah. And it's a controlled substance, no one knows what it's doing. It's possibly affecting the local youth and making them nastier. Okay, we've got a very weird setup here.
It's also oddly not mentioned by the sheriff as well. You think that the fact that in the last year there have been 7 rapes conducted by teenagers might have been brought up in connection with these weird cases, but the sheriff never mentions it.
No, I mean, then that makes me think of Contrast This to Blood, where you've got the sheriff helping Mulder, who was on the level and didn't know anything, and this stuff had been hid from him, and then he found out from whoever the hell Larry was that, they're spraying this controlled pesticide around.
And indeed, it's people who were in highly sprayed areas are the ones that are having the mental breakdowns.
Yeah. But also, as we get into the rest of the episode, there's a whole thing of they don't know where the meat that's come from this growth hormone has wound up. And it's the whole you feel that you should put more effort into it, and there should be outbreaks of violence and really awful behavior along those lines.
It's really unclear, though, how we've got the idea. It feels like, again, two plots mixed together as the cows being injected by purity control and also kids also being injected by purity control. Is what's the connection?
Yeah. We don't actually know that the cows are being injected with purity control, admittedly.
It's kind of inferred
It's
because
inferred.
The crew cut man kills the guy doing it.
Yeah, it's inferred, but we don't know it.
Mm. If it was just a normal growth hormone, why would crew cut man assassinate the guy doing it?
Well, yeah, admittedly there is that. Our last point here, though, is one of the whole inelegant bits of the X-Files casting. Is there's literally only one person in this episode who wears glasses, and you can see someone who was wearing glasses when they were peeping through the mirror at the start. Go.
So you know it's good like 10 minutes before the episode tells you that.
Yeah, it's a case of as soon as he looks around, it's a case of, well, he's wearing glasses.
The same distinct shape glasses as well.
Can you just try a little bit?
You think you'd do that trick where the killer has black shoes, so every single character is going to have black shoes, or something like that.
Or you didn't even need to see his eyes when he's staring through the mirror. All you have to have is the view through the peephole, and that'll get across that someone is back there.
Or you have the curve of a cheek and a bit of heavy breathing.
Yeah, there were ways to do this without making it blatantly obvious. Okay, so before we switch over episodes, as it were, is there anything else you want to say about the Red Museum portion of this episode?
No, I'm just going to caveat the Red Museum with, I think, at a face level, they are a neat idea if the episode had actually focused on them.
Yeah, if we'd gone for the walk-ins or something more about who was taking these kids and what they meant by he is one and she is one, some kind of weird supernatural explanation for that.
Or even building up the cult being a bit more sinister, or at least maybe, as they are now, they turn out to be benign, but we put more effort into making them seem a bit Manson family or Heaven's Gate-ish, or something to make us think that they are going to be dangerous to themselves or others.
Or make them shapeshifting Amish people.
Yeah, that works too.
Let's just go the whole hog. Let's have something.
This is where they've moved to.
Yeah, let's have something really weird like that. So then we come back from what would have been an ad break to a plane crashing involving characters we have not seen and have not been referenced up to this point.
It's so jarring. It just feels like we've skipped to the next episode or something like that.
Well, I think what's worse is there's no implication that this is the fault of anything in the episode. This is pure random chance that this plane has crashed, even though he was basically going to this town. So the crash at first feels like, they've happened to crash in the area, but then it's the whole, but you actually operated around this area, so you would have been landing here, and your engine is just fried, and there's no implication anyone's done this to you.
They are in a tiny little
Cessna or something, isn't it?
Yeah, it's got to be a Cessna or something like that.
It is a tiny plane, yeah.
Yeah. The kind that if it crashes, you're pretty much toast.
Yeah, and indeed they are. And then we just suddenly go full-bore conspiracy, because it's a case of he's got a briefcase full of money, and it's got credit card statements from all the victims' families who were abducted.
As well as your empty vial that has traces of purity control in it.
Shall we get on to that? Because this is such a headache for the conspiracy. This is one of the things I mentioned a few weeks ago of where the X-Files gets really frustrating, is it will advance you something, massive and world-shattering, and then very quickly afterwards it'll say, it's not quite what we said before, it's a lot more mundane than that. It's still big, but not that big.
I'm gonna go with, I think I brought it up when we talked about the Ellen Mayer flask. Why the hell is this substance called purity control? Control implies two things. Is one thing, it controls whatever it is, whatever purity is. The second, it's the control group, which means it doesn't do anything.
Yep.
So why is this stuff even called purity control as it is?
It sounded cool at the time, you know this. There was no forward planning for this stuff. They were making this up as they went along.
But at the same time, we didn't really find out what purity did. You could infer that purity made things aggressive because of the monkeys in the other Mayor Flask guy's office.
You could, but then that doesn't jibe with the doctor who was running around for most of that episode, who can now breathe underwater.
Yep. And at the same time, we have these kids in this that the only slightly odd thing we glean, although Gerd calls them monsters, they're only monsters in the sense of they're becoming more violent and more prone to impulse control issues, which is primarily seen in everything Rick does over the course of the episode.
And again, Gerd, what did you want to happen with these kids? You've kidnapped and marked them and made a big hoo-ha over it. Cool.
And then just release them into the woods.
Okay, so if you shot them, then we could completely
even the
understand.
fact that they're in their underwear infers that he's done something to them, but he hasn't.
I know, because they explicitly say there's no indication of sexual assault, and it's...
He's literally...
What are you doing?
Drugged these kids, stripped them down to their underwear, written on the back, and set them loose in the woods. It's a bizarre MO for a psychopath.
Yes, well, it's the problem of writing when you've got a cool image, and you include it, and you can't figure out how to justify any part of it. Or you can justify the writing, and you just gloss over the fact that you can't explain anything else.
Which is why it works for the opening sting and very quickly starts to lose momentum in the episode.
One thing I did realise as well, an interesting connection, is Dr. Larson giving the kids vitamin shots. Fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
Deep Throat, shortly before he died, mentioned a whole lot of people who were given the injected with the purity control substance under the guise of immunization shots.
Yeah.
So presumably this is part of that same program.
Yeah, one would assume so.
Not sure where we're going with that, but that's the connection.
Admittedly, we're seeing this from the outside, but all we know is that scientists are experimenting with purity control.
Yeah.
We don't really know what they're doing other than let's inject it in these random people and see what fun things happens.
Yeah, we do seem to have there's a weird tendency to inject into children, apparently. And not sure why we're doing that.
But they did seem to mistake in the last episode gene therapy with just injecting people with random things as well. That was something we noticed in Earl and Mayor Flask.
Yeah.
There is a lot more to gene therapy than just injecting somebody with a vial full of something.
In terms of the backside as well, though, I do find Scully's attitude a bit annoying with the whole, okay, Mulder, this vial contained purity control. It's a case of, okay, so let's revisit what you said then. This contains the 5th and 6th DNA base pairs do not exist on Earth, have never been encountered in nature as far as humans are concerned. By definition, must be extraterrestrial or silicon-based life form.
Mm-hmm.
Scully immediately says that was never proven. Case of, was it the 5th and 6th base pairs or not, Scully? She
witnessed...
she saw the tests.
Yeah, admittedly, that other scientist immediately had a mysterious and fatal car accident afterwards, but...
But she'd explained the methodology. You've got this thing that attracts DNA base pairs. There are gaps. The only thing that could possibly explain the gaps is you can't test for it.
And we've noted with Scully as well is the fact that even though she's supposed to be a medical doctor of some kind, she does kind of is our everyman scientist of the series and therefore understands
it's
the significance of this that Mulder doesn't.
It's something that things like Star Trek are also as guilty of. Although Star Trek actually is better because it defines Spock and McCoy as separate individuals.
You've got your science officer and your medical officer.
And they don't cross over very often. But X-Files is Scully's the scientist. She will do all of the science.
She does the autopsy. She provides our Dr. Watson medical advice. She's also our authority if we find like weird insects and fungus and stuff like that because she knows animals too, apparently. Yeah. But on that basis, Scully understands the significance of what we found in Purity.
Yeah.
She understands that that's the kind of thing that this doctor has not faked and all the rest of it.
It'd be extremely hard to fake this. So, but the point of that is, okay, Scully, even if you haven't proved that purity control was proof of alien life, it's still a substance that's almost beyond analysis and, does not exist in nature. That's still huge, and this episode forgets about that in favour of Crewcut Man.
It's the excitement and the abject disappointment of what we do with Crewcut Man as well. He's so important and we execute him off screen. It's
like, did they sort of go to the guy and say, we're going to guest star in the X-Files again? And he said, this is the last time. And they went, oh, okay, we'll have to kill you then. Because why bring back Deep Throat's killer, someone who absolutely must be connected to the cigarette smoking man and the conspiracy, and he's died. I'm not so sure why he's burning down the meat packing plant, because the growth hormones will be with the vet, not in the plant. Well, it might be in the meat in the plant, but that's secondary, surely.
I presume it's part of a bigger thing. He's been assassinating the people who are actually doing the injecting.
And also one kid.
We're also getting rid of the samples and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
But I feel it's the whole, we wrote ourselves into a corner in which we could not see an elegant way to extract the Crewcut Man, so we had to kill him.
Yeah. But at the same time, it's not clear what's brought him here. Is it the plane crash? Is it purely that Dr. Larson's died that they've now doing the cleanup? Was he doing unauthorized stuff like the guy in the Earl and Mayor Flask, which is why he got killed?
I felt inferred that Dr. Larson is doing something shifty because he's got a briefcase full of money and the sample. Does that infer he's going to sell it or something?
It's a very frustrating coincidence if Crooked Man has turned up at this exact moment to start clearing up the mess, just after he's died.
Literally within hours of his death.
Yeah.
And answers we'll never get because we've killed the crew cut man, the person who can answer it.
Someone who might be able to explain quite a lot of stuff. Not least, why did you shoot Deep Throat? I do actually notice that Mulder doesn't call him Deep Throat in this episode, unlike Little Green Men. Because in Little Green Men, he just calls him Deep Throat.
Yeah.
And in this episode, he says, my Deep Throat contact. So you've got a weird difference between how Morgan and Wong have been writing Mulder and how Chris Carter writes Mulder. But yeah, but purity control, we know, is in the kids. And also has to be constantly refreshed because they're continuing vitamin shots, which is a weird one.
It infers, I should have said it in my episode summary at the very end, that the kids, because they're not having their vitamin injections so far, have suddenly caught the flu.
Yeah.
So it inferred the fact that as it's breaking down, it's just made the kids very ill.
Ah, that's a missed opportunity then. Sorry, I just realised. They should all be excellent swimmers.
Be able to breathe underwater.
Yeah. And be able to hold their breath underwater for 10 minutes and everything. Or, 3 days.
Yeah.
And they don't. And we have that, the question the episode doesn't answer is, Scully has considered, presumably it's the level of purity control is too little in the beef that Scully ate to do anything to her.
You go on one of those things of if you're eating beef all the time.
Yeah. And then we've got it's dispersed into the wider food chain and no one knows exactly where it's gone. There's, the milk and the beef are both compromised.
But again, you're probably not under any risk unless, this is building up and you're eating lots of this stuff.
Yeah, and by this point there won't be any more. I did like the kind of trivial conspiratorial note that Beth's husband died in an accident at the meatpacking plant. Case of, I'm sure that was a complete accident.
Funny, he only had 2 days left to retirement.
He did not have to do it.
But it was just at the point when he was thinking of withdrawing his son from these medical trials.
Exactly. A bit too coincidental time-wise. I'm not sure why it's only Mulder who realises the mirror thing shortly after this. Because Scully says she got the creeps in our apartment.
I liked the use of the term the creeps as well, that was introduced to Scully in Shadows, I think. Shapes. Scully was introduced to the concept of the creeps in Shapes, and it's now frequently her go-to phrase of something's giving her the creeps.
Okay, that's interesting. But it's a case of, I don't know how Beth and anyone else has never sort of also felt the creeps or caught sight of the light on the other side of the mirror, and you didn't really hide yourself very well, and are all the apartments done like this, or is it just Beth's, and you're in the building and it used to be a daycare centre, and oh my god. But I think that comes back to the whole, we're going to have to just say that he is just, a paedophile, so was spying on the kids in the daycare centre, is the best we can take from this. Again,
it's another weird, unconnected thread in this episode.
It's an artifact, yeah. And in case of, and you care about these teenagers for what reason?
It's our weird plots is you've got this plot involving the Red Museum that doesn't build to anything. You've got your actual sequel to Earl and Mayor Flask about purity control. And then you've got this seemingly unconnected plot about a paedophile who's noticed that children are changing and now thinks that they're monsters. They're just like three weird plots mished together that don't really gel.
Yeah, it's just all kinds of frustrating. And also, the last bit where everything changes is Mulder realising that Crooked Man is going to kill everyone. Which more or less comes out of nowhere, that basically with Rick being killed, he will suddenly come for everyone else. So sends everyone off to the Red Museum for safety.
I guess it's hard for one assassin to blast his way through everyone to get there.
I wouldn't put it past him. I'll just blow up the building. I don't put anything past the conspiracy people at this point.
It's also the assumption that there's only him.
Yeah, it's a big assumption that he's operating alone. But then Mulder goes off to Crooked Man alone and goes to the slaughterhouse because...
using his Mulder powers to know that's exactly where he'll be.
Yeah, reading the script again, because Mulder, you either are precog or psychic, or you've got access to the script.
Oh, he's part of the conspiracy. Mulder's been the double agent all along.
What a double twist at the final end of the series. Haha, Scully.
It's like that weird twist that Marvel tried to pull when they suddenly revealed that Captain America was a Nazi.
Yeah.
It's one of those weird twists. It's like Mulder has actually been working for the Cancer Man all along, despite the fact all the evidence to the contrary.
Crooked Man, it cannot be identified because he's got no criminal record. Fair enough. That's kind of what you expect, really. But we do have to have some words about purity control as well, though, given that... So we know it has to be reinforced constantly, presumably because it's not compatible with humans generally, because it's a foreign substance.
It's a foreign substance. They presumably have limited amounts of it, and we don't know exactly what it does.
Yeah, but I find it interesting that basically without the reinforcement, the stuff breaks down very rapidly, and that feels less, this is, we've got to sustain this somehow, and more, we need to wrap this up very fast. They cannot be allowed to hang on to this evidence for going forward.
It's even more rapid. You think we're attributing this to real sciences that most inoculants break down. You're going with the whole, like, a tetanus jab you're supposed to have every 10 years because it'll break down. But this is so fast.
Yeah, this is an order of, weeks, months, maybe?
It's even our COVID vaccines were supposed to last 6 months or something.
This is just, this is way too fast, and I think it's basically there so that they have a limited window to get anything out of these kids, and once it passes, they're without evidence again, and they're back to square one, which seems to be how Chris Carter writes conspiracy episodes at this point.
Seems so.
That's really disappointing.
Presumably at some point we're going to have to start building on these and not just having these one-shot conspiracy episodes that I think Chris Carter perhaps realises we're learning too much too quickly and has to kind of nix.
Yeah, I mean, retracting the Erlenmeyer flask is so weird, given it was the whole... This is the fulcrum of Series 1 into the rest of the series. You had to have that big reveal. Scully has to be brought up to speed to believe things, and now she doesn't. We don't actually know what she thinks about aliens anymore.
No, it's true. We've been a bit vague since Little Green Men about what Scully actually believes, even though she had that... Admittedly, she couldn't test it, but the alien fetus in her hands in the Erlenmeyer flask.
And was shown evidence that the 5th and 6th base pairs that don't exist on Earth were in this sample. So, but we don't know how much she believes of it.
You find that Scully is faster to believe things these days.
With evidence.
Like the silicone-based life form and things.
That's true.
She's not denying things outright like she used to.
No, I mean, she has... again, though, she's getting good evidence. It's not. We're no longer Scully does not see. We're now Scully sees and will come up with an explanation why it doesn't actually mean what you think it means.
Yeah. Which is fair enough.
Which is fairer. Still frustrating on aggregate, though. So, anything else for this episode?
No, I think we've more than covered it.
Cool. Is there any point in doing a conspiracy corner? Because it's basically, what you knew last time, but with less evidence for it.
Kim's Conspiracy Corner Rage Edition.
Yeah. Do you want to do one? Or we could... I think you can make an argument either way, because we've got... Firewalker has some elements of conspiracy, but that's very much the generic. The government are covering us up for reasons. And Red Museum is... remember all the dangling threads? Well, they're gone.
I think Red Museum is just more carrying on from Erlenmeyer Flask. Just to give a brief conspiracy corner, is we already knew that in Erlenmeyer Flask that whatever purity control is, it's alien in origin and it's been used in some kind of inoculation program. And this is the inoculation program we are now seeing, but we haven't learnt anything new about it.
And the only person who could have told us is dead, and all the people who were being inoculated no longer have the inoculants in the system.
And again, it's just a more solid consolidation of what we learnt in Blood, is the fact that the government are conducting these experiments on controlled substances in small-town America. And here's another example of that.
So next time we have...
Excelsis Day and Aubrey.
So preemptive content warning for Excelsis Day, because we may as well sort of reinforce this one, is...
Excelsis Day is more graphic than our previous content warnings, because it's the opening sting and it's a major plot.
Yeah, we can't get around not talking about sexual assault, so be wary that's coming in Excelsis Day. Our theme music is Envisioned by Kevin MacLeod. You can find that on incompetech.com. Licensed under the Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0. If you'd like to email us, our email is thingsaregettingstrange42@gmail.com.
As we noted at the start of the episode, I'm always more than happy to promote any X-Files things you've got going on. be it conventions, contests, any cool artwork you're working on, like those Funko Pops, just hit me up on any of our social media. I'm happy to talk about it. You can find us on Twitter and Tumblr. Both of our usernames on those are GetStrange42. You can find us on Mastodon at getstrange42@universedon.com, or you can find us on Facebook by searching for Things Are Getting Strange and X-Files Rewatch Podcast.
Thank you for listening, and I hope you'll join us next week. And until next time, remember, the truth is far from here.